He called her his anchor, but he meant she was a weight dragging him down. Trenton thought bringing his quiet, modest wife, Valerie, to the year's most exclusive luxury gala was a mistake. He spent the entire night mocking her plain dress, her silence, and her lack of connections, desperate to impress the billionaires in the room. He even tried to send her home in a taxi so he could flirt with his mistress. But Trenton forgot one thing. In a room full of sharks, you don't mock the owner of the ocean. When the host took the stage, Trenton's life fell apart in exactly 3 seconds. The invitation was printed on cardstock so thick it felt like a tile of slate in Valerie's hands. Gold leaf edges, embossed lettering, and a scent of expensive sandalwood that seemed to mock the stale air of their apartment. The Obsidian Gala. The Pembroke estate. Valerie placed it on the vanity, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked into the mirror. The woman staring back was 32, though the shadows under her eyes made her look older. She wore a simple navy sheath dress she had bought off the rack at a department store 3 years ago. It was elegant, respectable, and entirely invisible. "Are you ready yet?" The voice came from the hallway, sharp and impatient. Trenton walked in, adjusting the cufflinks on his bespoke tuxedo. He looked like a movie star, tall, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, with that perfect, practiced smile that had charmed half the city's real estate developers. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes raking over her. The smile vanished. "That's what you're wearing?" Trenton asked, his tone flat. Valerie smoothed the fabric over her hips. "It's the nicest thing I own, Trent. The blue one you liked for the company Christmas party." "That was a Christmas party, Val. This is the Obsidian Gala. Arthur Pembroke is going to be there. The board of directors for the merger will be there." He sighed, a loud, theatrical exhalation of air that signaled his immense burden. "You look like a librarian or a secretary." "I can stay home," Valerie said quietly. She had offered this 3 times already. "And look like I'm having marital problems?" "No." Trenton walked over, gripping her shoulders. It wasn't a hug. It was a restraint. "You come, you smile, and for the love of God, Valerie, just don't speak unless someone speaks to you directly. These people talk about private equity and offshore holdings. You talk about, what, your garden? Coupon clipping?" Valerie looked down at his polished shoes. "I'm an accountant, Trenton. I understand money." "You do taxes for small businesses, Val. You don't understand wealth," he sneered, releasing her. "There's a difference. Just grab your coat, the one without the stain." They walked down to the waiting car in silence. Trenton was already on his phone, typing furiously. Valerie knew who he was texting. It wasn't business. It was likely her. Bianca. Valerie wasn't stupid. She had seen the messages pop up on his lock screen, names saved as T-Mobile support that texted at 11 p.m. with heart emojis. She had smelled the perfume that wasn't hers, a cloying, sugary vanilla scent that clung to his blazers. She stayed because she believed in vows. She stayed because she remembered the Trenton she met 5 years ago, the one who worked hard and made her laugh. But the Trenton was dead. He had been replaced by this man, a man addicted to the climb, desperate to reach a social stratum that didn't want him. "Listen to me," Trenton said as the town car glided onto the highway. "Tonight is make or break. If I land the Pembroke account, I make partner. If I make partner, we move out of that dump and into the skyline penthouse. I need you to be decorative. Can you manage that?" "I'll do my best," Valerie whispered. "Good. And if Bianca is there—" He paused, catching himself. "If Bianca Russo from the marketing team is there, be polite. She's been helping me with the pitch." "I'm sure she has," Valerie said, staring out the window at the passing city lights. Trenton didn't catch the sarcasm. He was too busy checking his reflection in the dark window, practicing his winning smile. He didn't see the cold resolve hardening in Valerie's eyes. He didn't know that the Pembroke estate wasn't just a venue to her. He didn't know that 50 years ago, the estate had belonged to a man named William, a man Valerie called Grandpa. The Pembroke estate was less a house and more a fortress of limestone and glass, perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The driveway was a winding ribbon of pavement lined with Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and Ferraris. As their car pulled up to the valet stand, the flash of cameras erupted. This was the society event of the decade. The press was hungry. Trenton practically leapt out of the car, buttoning his jacket. He went around to Valerie's side, not to help her out, but to hiss a final warning. "Stay 2 steps behind me. Don't block the photographers." Valerie stepped out. The flashbulbs blinded her for a moment. She heard the shouts of the paparazzi. "Trenton, look here! Who are you wearing? Over here, Mr. Miller!" Trenton soaked it up, waving with a casual arrogance. He grabbed Valerie's elbow, guiding her up the red carpet with a grip that was bruisingly tight. "Smile," he muttered through grit teeth. "You look miserable." "I'm just dazzled by the lights," she said. "Try not to look like a deer in headlights. It's embarrassing." They entered the ground foyer. It was a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers the size of small cars, and a floor made of imported Italian marble. The room buzzed with the low, expensive hum of the elite. Waiters in white gloves drifted through the crowd with trays of champagne. Trenton grabbed 2 glasses, downed one immediately, and handed the other to Valerie. "Hold this. Don't drink it too fast. You'll get flushed." He scanned the room, his eyes darting around like a predator seeking prey. Suddenly, his face lit up. There they are, the Sterling brothers. And, yes, that's Bianca. Valerie followed his gaze. Near a massive ice sculpture of a swan, a group of people stood laughing. At the center was Bianca Russo. She was stunning, wearing a dress that was essentially red liquid silk held together by hope and diamonds. She was everything Valerie wasn't, loud, vibrant, and expensive. Trenton adjusted his tie. "Stay here, Val. I'm going to go say hello. I need to network." "You're leaving me by the entrance?" "You don't know them, Val. You'd just be awkward. Stand near the pillar. Look mysterious. I'll be back in 10 minutes. He didn't wait for an answer. He strode across the room, slipping into the circle around Bianca with the ease of a man who belonged there. Valerie watched as he kissed Bianca on the cheek, a linger that lasted 2 seconds too long for a colleague. Bianca laughed, touching his arm, her fingers trailing down his bicep. Valerie felt a familiar sting in her chest, but she swallowed it down. She turned away, looking at the art on the walls. "An interesting piece, isn't it?" The voice was gravelly and deep. Valerie turned to see an older man standing next to her. He was in a wheelchair, dressed in a tuxedo that looked older than Trenton's entire wardrobe, yet infinitely more expensive. He had a shock of white hair and eyes that were sharp, blue, and piercingly intelligent. "It is," Valerie said softly. "It's a replica of a moody Renaissance piece, but the brushwork is too heavy to be original." The old man raised an eyebrow. "You know art." "I know this art," Valerie said, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "My grandfather used to have a print of this in his study. He told me the original was lost in a fire in 1942. The old man studied her face. "Your grandfather sounds like a man of culture." "He was a man of many things," Valerie said. "Stubbornness, mostly." The man chuckled. "I'm Arthur." Valerie froze. Arthur. As in Arthur Pembroke, the host, the billionaire owner of the estate, the man Trenton would kill to speak to. She looked at him. He wasn't wearing a name tag. He was sitting alone by a pillar, unnoticed by the vultures circling the room. "I'm Valerie," she said, extending a hand. Arthur took it. His grip was frail but warm. "Just Valerie. No surname?" "Valerie. Miller," she said, using Trenton's last name. It tasted like ash in her mouth. "And what brings you to my humble shack, Valerie Miller?" "My husband," she nodded toward the group by the ice sculpture. Trenton was currently throwing his head back in laughter at something Bianca had said. "He's hoping to impress Arthur Pembroke tonight." Arthur's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Is he now? And where is this husband?" "Over there, the one in the black velvet tuxedo. He thought I would be more comfortable waiting here." "Ah," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave. "He parked you." "He calls it being decorative," Valerie admitted. She didn't know why she was telling this stranger the truth. Maybe it was because he looked so kind. Maybe it was because she was done lying. Arthur looked at Trenton, then back at Valerie. The kindness in his eyes hardened into something steely. "Well, Valerie, I have a feeling the evening is about to get much more interesting. Tell me, do you like champagne?" "Not particularly. It gives me a headache." "Good girl. Can't stand the stuff myself. Tastes like battery acid and pretension." He signaled a waiter with a mere twitch of his finger. "Bring us 2 ginger ales, with lime." As they sipped their sodas, Trenton finally looked back. He saw Valerie talking to an old man in a wheelchair. From the distance, Arthur looked like just another elderly relative, perhaps a senile uncle dumped in the corner. Trenton excused himself from Bianca and stormed over. His face was a mask of irritation. "Valerie!" he hissed as he approached, ignoring Arthur completely. "What are you doing?" "I'm talking to Arthur," Valerie said calmly. Trenton glanced at the old man, sneering. He didn't recognize him. He saw a wheelchair and a dated suit and assumed Arthur was a nobody. "That's nice," Trenton said condescendingly, patting her arm. "Look, honey, I need you to go find the restroom or get some air. The CEO of Pembroke Industries is supposedly arriving in the main hall any minute. I need to be front and center. I can't have you distracting me with your little conversations." He turned to the old man, flashing a fake plastic smile. "Sorry, Pops. My wife loves to chat. Hope she didn't bore you to death." Arthur looked at Trenton. The silence that followed was heavy. "She wasn't boring me at all," Arthur said, his voice deceptively light. "We were discussing art and bad manners." Trenton rolled his eyes. "Right. Well, excuse us." He grabbed Valerie's arm again. "Come on, Val." He dragged her away, leaving the owner of the estate sitting alone with his ginger ale. "You idiot!" Trenton whispered harshly, once they were out of earshot. "Who was that? Some geriatric crashing the party for free drinks? You're supposed to be networking with useful people, Valerie, not nursing home escapees." He was nice, Trenton. Nice doesn't buy a penthouse. Nice doesn't get me a partnership. God, you are useless tonight. He stopped, checking his watch. "Okay, look. Bianca invited us to sit at her table for the keynote speech. Do not, I repeat, do not embarrass me. Sit there, eat your salad, and nod. If anyone asks what you do, tell them you're in consulting. It's vague enough to mean nothing." They approached table 1, the VIP table. Bianca was already seated, holding court. She saw Trenton and patted the empty chair next to her. "Trent, saved you a seat." She beamed. Then her eyes slid to Valerie. The warmth evaporated. "Oh. And Mrs. Miller. Hello. There's a chair. Over there." She pointed to a seat at the far end of the table, separated from Trenton by 3 other people. Trenton didn't even hesitate. "Perfect. Thanks, B." He sat next to Bianca. Valerie walked to the end of the table and sat down. She was seated next to a potted fern and a man who was aggressively eating a bread roll. She looked down the table. Trenton was leaning in close to Bianca, whispering in her ear. Bianca giggled, touching his knee under the table. They thought they were subtle. They were as subtle as a neon sign. Valerie felt a tear prick the corner of her eye. She reached for her water glass, her hand shaking. Enough, she thought. This is enough. Suddenly the lights in the grand ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage. The room went silent. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host for the evening, Mr. Arthur Pembroke." The curtain rose, and there, rolling to the center of the stage in his wheelchair, was the geriatric Trenton had just insulted. Trenton's face went white. He dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against his china plate, the sound echoing in the silent room. Arthur Pembroke adjusted the microphone. He looked out into the crowd. His eyes scanned the front row, passed over the billionaires and the models, and locked directly onto table 1. "Good evening," Arthur said. "Tonight is a celebration of legacy. But before we begin, I want to tell you a story about a man I met 5 minutes ago. A man who thinks kindness is a weakness." Trenton stopped breathing. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. It wasn't the silence of an empty room, but the suffocating, heavy silence of 500 people holding their breath simultaneously. Arthur Pembroke sat on the stage, the spotlight reflecting off the chrome of his wheelchair, making him look like a king on an iron throne. He didn't speak immediately. He let the discomfort marinate. He took a sip of water, his eyes still fixed on table 1. Trenton felt a cold bead of sweat roll down the back of his neck, soaking into his starch-stiffened collar. He gripped his napkin so hard his knuckles turned white. "The man I met earlier," Arthur continued, his voice echoing through the high-tech sound system, "told me that his wife was useless at a gathering like this. He told me that she was merely decorative. He dismissed an old man in a wheelchair as a nobody because he assumed power only wears Italian suits and stands 6 feet tall." A few nervous titters rippled through the room. People were looking around, trying to identify the culprit. Trenton stared straight ahead, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "He can't mean me," Trenton thought desperately. "He doesn't know who I am. I'm nobody, just a junior executive." "But," Arthur said, his voice softening, "that man made a fatal error. He forgot that true wealth isn't about the balance in your bank account. It's about memory. It's about loyalty. And it's about blood." Arthur gestured to the massive screen behind him. The image of the moody Renaissance piece Valerie had admired earlier appeared. "This painting," Arthur said, "was purchased in 1938 by my business partner, a man who built Pembroke Industries alongside me, a man who saved the company from bankruptcy in the 70s by selling his own home. His name was William Caldwell." At the mention of the name, Valerie gasped. The sound was small, but in the quiet radius of table 1, it was audible. She brought a hand to her mouth. William Caldwell, her grandfather. Trenton looked at her, annoyed by her reaction. "Keep it down," he hissed out of the side of his mouth. "Why are you reacting? You didn't know Pembroke had a partner." "I did," Valerie whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I just didn't know. I didn't know Arthur was that Arthur." Arthur continued. "William died 10 years ago. He was a humble man. He didn't believe in trust funds or spoiling children. He wanted his descendants to learn the value of $1. So he left his shares, 49% of this company, in a blind trust to be revealed only when his heir proved they had the character to wield it." The room erupted in murmurs, 49% of Pembroke Industries was worth billions. It was enough to buy countries. Bianca leaned over to Trenton, her eyes wide with greed. Did you know about this? 49%? Whoever the heir is, they're the most powerful person in this room. Probably some spoiled brat in Europe, Trenton muttered, wiping his forehead. Who cares? I care, Arthur boomed, cutting through the noise. Because for 10 years I have watched. I have waited. I needed to know if William's granddaughter had his heart, or if she was just another shark waiting to feed. Arthur's eyes found Valerie again. The spotlight operator seemed to follow his gaze. A beam of light swung across the room, blindingly bright, sweeping over the heads of the crowd. It slowed. It stopped. It landed directly on Valerie Miller. Trenton blinked, shielding his eyes. What the hell? Why is the light on us? He straightened his tie, a sudden, desperate hope flaring in his chest. Is it me? Did he realize I'm the rising star? Valerie, Arthur said, his voice warm and inviting. Would you please join me on stage? The room turned. 500 heads swiveled. The air was sucked out of the room. Trenton froze. He looked at his wife, the woman he had mocked for her dress, the woman he had called a secretary, the woman he planned to divorce once he got his promotion. Me? Valerie mouthed, pointing to her chest. Yes, my dear. You, Arthur said. Come up here. It's time you took your rightful place. Valerie stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. She smoothed the navy dress, the dress Trenton hated. In the harsh glare of the spotlight, she didn't look plain. She looked terrified, but dignified. Valerie! Trenton grabbed her wrist, his grip hard. What is going on? How does he know you? Let go, Trenton, she said. It was the first time in years she had given him an order. Sit down, he hissed, panic making his voice crack. You're making a scene. This is a mistake. You're nobody. Let go. She yanked her arm free. The force of it surprised him. He fell back into his chair, stunned. Valerie walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. As she walked, the whispers began. Who is she? Is that the heir? I think that's the woman who was standing by the pillar. Look at her dress. It's off the rack. She's one of us? She ascended the stairs. Arthur offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to the center of the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur announced, raising her hand in the air, I introduce you to Valerie Caldwell Miller, granddaughter of William Caldwell, and the majority shareholder of Pembroke Industries. The applause started slowly, then swelled into a roar, but Trenton didn't hear it. All he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears. The room was spinning. Bianca turned to him, her face a mask of horror. Trenton, you said she was a boring accountant. You said she did taxes for bakeries. She does, Trenton stammered. She never told me. I didn't know. Bianca looked at Valerie on stage, then back at Trenton. She moved her chair 3 inches away from him. You idiot, she whispered. You just spent the last 2 hours treating the owner of the company like a servant. The minutes following the announcement were a blur of chaotic energy. The formal structure of the gala disintegrated. The barrier between the stage and the floor vanished as people surged forward, eager to get a look at the new queen of the boardroom. Valerie stood by Arthur's wheelchair, looking overwhelmed. Waiters appeared out of thin air with fresh glasses of water and chairs for her. Billionaires who hadn't looked twice at her when she entered were now fighting to make eye contact. Trenton sat paralyzed at table 1. The seat next to him, Bianca's seat, was empty. She had vanished the moment the applause died down, likely to scrub her social media of any photos of them together. I have to fix this, Trenton muttered to himself. His survival instinct, honed by years of corporate climbing, kicked into overdrive. "She's my wife. This is our money. This is our company." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. He put on his best, concerned husband face. He marched toward the stage, pushing past a stunned CEO of a rival tech firm. Excuse me, Trenton said loudly. "That's my wife. Let me through." He reached the edge of the stage. A security guard, a man the size of a vending machine, stepped in his path. "Step back, sir." "You don't understand," Trenton said, flashing his VIP badge. "I'm Trenton Miller. That is Mrs. Valerie Miller. I need to be up there with her. She gets anxious in crowds. She needs me." On stage, Arthur leaned over to Valerie. "The wolf is at the door, my dear. Do you want him here?" Valerie looked down. She saw Trenton. He looked small. For the first time, she noticed how much hair gel he used, how desperate his smile was, how his eyes weren't looking at her face, but at the diamond brooch Arthur had just pinned to her dress. "No," Valerie said. Her voice was steady. "I don't need him." Arthur nodded to the security guard. The guard turned to Trenton. "Mrs. Miller is busy, sir. Please return to your seat." "Busy? She's my wife," Trenton shouted. People turned to stare. The humiliation was burning him alive. Val, tell them. We're a team, remember? The Skyline penthouse. We can buy the whole building now." Valerie stepped to the microphone. The room quieted down to hear her speak. "Trenton," she said. Her voice was amplified, booming through the hall. "You told me earlier that I should only speak if spoken to. You told me I didn't understand wealth." Trenton froze. His face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. "You were right," Valerie continued. "I didn't understand wealth. I thought wealth was what you wanted. Flashy cars, penthouses, and people fearing you. But my grandfather taught me that wealth is the ability to protect the things that matter. And right now, I need to protect this company from people like you." A collective "oh" went through the crowd. It was the kind of public undressing that ended careers. "Valerie, baby, let's not do this here," Trenton pleaded, his hands raised in surrender. "I was stressed. The merger, the pressure. You know how I get." "I do know how you get," Valerie said. "I know you get T-Mobile support, text messages at midnight that smell like vanilla perfume. I know you parked me by the door so you could flirt with your mistress. I know you mocked me to the man who owns this building." She looked at Arthur. "Is Bianca Russo still in the building?" Arthur checked a tablet handed to him by an assistant. "Security logs show Ms. Russo exited the side door 3 minutes ago. She requested an Uber to the airport." Laughter rippled through the room. Trenton looked around, wild-eyed. He was alone. Completely, utterly alone. The corporate sharks he had tried so hard to impress were now looking at him with disgust. Not because he was a cheater, but because he was a failure. In their world, cheating was common. Being stupid enough to cheat on the heir to the fortune was unforgivable. "Security," Arthur said calmly. "Please escort Mr. Miller to the exit and ensure he doesn't take the gift bag." 2 guards grabbed Trenton by the elbows. "You can't do this!" Trenton screamed as they dragged him backward. "I have rights! I'm her husband! Half of that is mine! I'll sue! I'll take half!" Valerie watched him go. She didn't feel triumph. She felt exhaustion. It was like watching a tumor being cut out of her life. Painful, bloody, but necessary for survival. As the door slammed shut behind Trenton, the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The tension broke. Arthur turned to Valerie. "You did well, kid. William would be proud." "I feel like I'm going to throw up," Valerie admitted, gripping the podium. "That's normal," Arthur said. "But you can't throw up yet. We have business to discuss. Real business." "I'm an accountant, Arthur. I do tax returns." "Not anymore," Arthur said, his expression turning serious. "The reason I revealed you tonight wasn't just to punish your idiot husband. It was because we are in trouble, Valerie. The board of directors has been trying to force a sale of Pembroke Industries to a conglomerate that strips companies for parts. They want to fire 5,000 employees. They want to sell the land this estate sits on." Valerie's eyes widened. "What?" "I own 49%. The board owns 49%. The remaining 2% was lost in legal limbo after William died. Or so they thought." Arthur pulled a folder from his jacket. "William left that 2% to you specifically, separate from the trust, but he added a clause. You couldn't claim it until you stood up for yourself against a great adversary." Arthur smiled wryly. "I think Trenton just qualified as a great adversary, or at least a great nuisance." "So," Valerie stammered, "I'm the tiebreaker?" "You are the swing vote," Arthur said. "Tomorrow morning, the board is holding an emergency meeting to vote on the sale. If you aren't there, or if you vote with them, the company dies. My legacy dies. Your grandfather's legacy dies." Valerie looked at the crowd. They were drinking champagne again, oblivious to the war that was about to start. "But I don't know how to run a global conglomerate," she whispered. "You don't need to run it yet," Arthur said. "You just need to stop them from killing it. But be warned, Valerie. Trenton was a mosquito. The men on the board? They are vipers, and they will come for you the moment they find out you've kicked Trenton out. They will try to use him against you." Valerie straightened her back. The image of Trenton being dragged out was still fresh in her mind. The fear was fading, replaced by a cold, burning anger. "Let them come," she said. Arthur grinned. "That's the spirit. Now let's go get you a real drink. I think there's a bottle of vintage scotch in my office that survived the war." As they moved off stage, Valerie's phone buzzed in her clutch. She hesitated, then looked at it. It was a text from Trenton. "Please pick up. I can explain. We need to talk about the prenup." Valerie stared at the screen. She didn't delete the message. She took a screenshot. Then she blocked the number. The morning sun didn't feel warm. It felt exposing. Valerie sat in the back of Arthur's armored SUV, clutching a leather binder so tightly her knuckles were white. She hadn't slept. After the gala, she and Arthur had spent 6 hours in his study, poring over the bylaws of Pembroke Industries. She had learned more about corporate law in one night than she had in 10 years of marriage to a man who claimed to be a business genius. "Nervous?" Arthur asked. He was sitting opposite her, looking surprisingly fresh for a man of 80 who had pulled an all-nighter. "Terrified," Valerie admitted. "They're going to eat me alive, Arthur. You said it yourself. They are vipers." "They are," Arthur agreed, pouring a cup of black coffee from a thermos. "But vipers are cowards. They strike when you turn your back. Keep your eyes on them, and they freeze." The car slowed to a halt in front of the Pembroke Tower. It was a glass monolith piercing the sky, a symbol of dominance in the city skyline. Valerie had walked past this building 1,000 times, never dreaming she owned half of it. "Ready?" "No." "Good. Comfort makes you sloppy." They took the private elevator to the top floor. The doors slid open to reveal a reception area that cost more than Valerie's entire childhood home. A receptionist looked up, startled to see Arthur, who rarely came to the office, and the woman from the news. "Mr. Pembroke," the receptionist stammered. "The board is already in session. They weren't expecting you." "I bet they weren't," Arthur growled. "Let's crash the party." They walked down the long corridor to the double mahogany doors. Arthur pushed them open. The room fell silent. Around the massive oval table, sat 12 men and women in suits that cost as much as cars. At the head of the table sat Charles Kensington, the chief operating officer. He was a man with a face like a hawk, sharp, predatory, and devoid of warmth. "Arthur," Charles said, his voice smooth but cold, "we were just discussing the instability caused by your little stunt at the Gala last night. Stock prices are fluctuating." "The stock is up 4%, Charles," Arthur said, wheeling himself to the head of the table. "The market likes a mystery, and they love a Cinderella story." Arthur gestured to the empty seat next to him. "Gentlemen, ladies, I believe you've seen the news, but allow me to formally introduce Valerie Caldwell Miller, the majority shareholder." Valerie stepped forward. She wasn't wearing the navy dress anymore. Arthur's stylist had arrived at 6 a.m. She was wearing a structured white blazer and sharp black trousers, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She looked like a CEO. She sat down. Charles Kensington didn't stand. He didn't smile. He looked at her over the rim of his glasses. "Mrs. Miller," Charles said, emphasizing the Mrs. "While we appreciate the theatrical nature of your inheritance, this board has serious business to discuss. Business that requires experience, complex understanding of global markets. We are currently voting on the merger with Omnicorp." "I'm aware," Valerie said. Her voice shook slightly, then steadied. "Arthur briefed me." "Then you know it's the only way to save the company," Charles said dismissively. "We've prepared a document for you to sign, transferring your voting proxy to the board until you are acclimated. It's standard procedure for inexperienced heirs." He slid a thick document across the polished table. Valerie looked at it. She picked up a pen. Charles smiled, a small, triumphant twitch of his lips. He thought it would be this easy. He thought she was just a housewife who would sign anything to make the scary men stop looking at her. Valerie flipped the document over. She wrote one word on the back in large, bold letters. "No." She slid it back. "I won't be signing that, Mr. Kensington," she said. The smile vanished from Charles's face. "Excuse me?" "I've reviewed the Omnicorp proposal," Valerie said, reciting the facts she had memorized hours ago. "They aren't buying us for our innovation. They're buying us for our patents. They plan to liquidate the Research and Development Division, where 4,000 people work, and sell the estate for commercial development. That isn't saving the company. That's butchering it." "It's maximizing value," a board member shouted from the back. "It's maximizing your golden parachutes," Valerie countered, turning to face him. "I saw the exit packages attached to the deal. You, Mr. Henderson, stand to make $12 million if the sale goes through. Is that why you're so eager to sell my grandfather's legacy?" The room went deathly quiet. Charles leaned forward. "Listen to me, little girl. You might have the shares, but you don't have the power. You are currently in the middle of a public divorce scandal. Your husband, Mr. Miller, has been calling my office all morning." Valerie's heart skipped a beat. "Trenton." "Yes," Charles said, his eyes gleaming with malice. "He claims that under your marital laws, he is entitled to 50% of your assets. That includes your voting rights. If he challenges your mental state, which he claims is hysterical, we can tie your shares up in court for years, during which time the board will run this company." He tapped the table. "So you can sign the proxy and keep your dignity, or we can bring Mr. Miller in here, and you can fight over the scraps." It was a bluff, or maybe it wasn't. But it was cruel. They were weaponizing her trauma against her. Valerie looked at Arthur. He gave her a subtle nod. "Stand your ground." She looked back at Charles. "Call him," she said. Charles blinked. "What?" "Call Trenton," Valerie said. "Bring him in. But before you do, You should check the date on our prenuptial agreement." Charles frowned. "We were told there was no prenup." "Trenton told you that," Valerie corrected. "Because Trenton is a liar. 5 years ago, when we got married, Trenton had just made his first commission check. He had about $10,000 in savings. I had nothing. But he was so paranoid that I was after his fortune that he forced me to sign an ironclad prenup. It states that what is yours and what is mine, forever. No alimony, no division of assets acquired during the marriage or via inheritance." She leaned in, her eyes locking with Charles's. "He made me sign it to protect his 10 grand. But now, it protects my 10 billion. She stood up. "My vote is no on the merger. And as the holder of 51% of the voting stock, the motion is denied. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go fire my husband's mistress from the marketing department. I believe that falls under cleaning house." She turned and walked out. Behind her, Arthur Pembroke started laughing, a deep, booming sound that echoed off the terrified faces of the board. Trenton Miller sat on the edge of the bed in a motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. It was the only place he could afford with cash. His credit cards had been declined at the Four Seasons an hour ago. He stared at his phone. No messages. Bianca had blocked him. His boss had emailed him a termination notice at 8 a.m. Gross misconduct at a company event. His landlord had texted him saying the locks were being changed because the lease was in Valerie's name. Trenton had insisted on that years ago because he didn't want the credit hit if they missed a payment. "It's not over," he muttered, running a hand through his unwashed hair. "She can't do this. I'm the husband." He grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the room. He had a meeting with a lawyer, a guy named Saul, who advertised on the back of bus benches. It wasn't the high-powered legal team he was used to, but it was all he had left. The lawyer's office was above a laundromat. Saul was a sweaty man with a mustard stain on his tie. "So let me get this straight," Saul said, chewing on a pen. "Your wife turns out to be a secret billionaire, and you mocked her? Publicly?" "I didn't know." Trenton slammed his hand on the desk. "She deceived me. That's fraud, isn't it? Marriage by deception?" "Not really," Saul shrugged. "Did she lie? Or did you just never ask about her family?" Trenton opened his mouth, then closed it. He hadn't asked. He had been too busy talking about himself. "Look, Mr. Miller, California is a community property state. Usually you'd get half, but you mentioned a document." "The prenup," Trenton waved a hand dismissively. "I had my buddy draft it years ago. Just a boilerplate thing to keep her away from my commission checks. It's garbage. We can break it." Saul sighed. "Let me see it." Trenton pulled the crumpled copy from his briefcase. He had kept it all these years as a trophy, a reminder of how smart he was. Saul put on his glasses. He read in silence for 5 minutes. "Well?" Trenton asked impatiently. "We can argue coercion, right? Or that circumstances have changed?" Saul closed the folder and slid it back. "Mr. Miller, who wrote this?" "My friend Dave. He was in law school." "Dave was a genius," Saul said. "This is the most aggressive separation of assets clause I've ever seen. It specifically waives all rights to future inheritances, windfalls, lottery winnings, and trust distributions. It says essentially that if she wins the Powerball, you don't get a dime. If she becomes the Queen of England, you don't get a castle. But I signed it to protect me," Trenton screamed. "And it worked," Saul said dryly. "She can't touch your commission checks, but you can't touch her billions. You signed your own death warrant, legally speaking." Trenton stared at the wall. The irony hit him like a physical blow. His own greed, his own arrogance, his own paranoia. It had all been a trap he built for himself. "There has to be something," Trenton whispered. "Spousal support? Waived. Emotional distress? You cheated on her, Mr. Miller, in public, with a co-worker. If we go to court, she'll countersue for adultery and public humiliation. You'll end up paying her legal fees." Saul stood up. "That'll be $500 for the consultation." Trenton walked out of the office in a daze. He had nothing. He wandered the streets for hours. By afternoon, he found himself standing in front of the apartment building, the dump he had been so desperate to leave. He saw a moving truck outside. Men were carrying boxes. He ran forward. Hey, that's my stuff!" A woman stepped out of the building. It was Valerie. She looked different. It wasn't just the clothes. It was the way she stood. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was up. "Valerie!" Trenton shouted, pushing past a mover. He ran to her, falling to his knees on the sidewalk. "Val, please, we need to talk." Valerie looked down at him. She didn't look angry anymore. She just looked bored. "There's nothing to talk about, Trenton. The divorce papers will be served to you tomorrow. I'm just moving my things to the estate." "Baby, please." Trenton grabbed the hem of her trousers. "I'm sorry. I was an idiot. I was stressed. The money. It doesn't matter to me. I just want you. I love you." "You don't love me," Valerie said, stepping back so he couldn't touch her. "You love the idea of someone admiring you. You love having an audience. And now that the audience is bigger than you want a front row seat." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Valerie gestured to the street. "If I were still just the accountant in the navy dress, would you be on your knees right now? Or would you be at a bar with Bianca?" Trenton opened his mouth to lie, but the words wouldn't come out. He knew the answer. She knew the answer. "Here," Valerie said. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She tossed it onto the ground in front of him. "What is this?" Trenton asked, picking it up. "It's a check for $10,000, Valerie said. Trenton looked up, hope sparking in his eyes. You're helping me?" "No," Valerie said coldly. "That's the exact amount you had in your savings account when we met. The amount you were so terrified I would steal. I'm returning it to you. Now we are even." She turned to the driver of the black SUV waiting for her. "Let's go." "Valerie, wait." Trenton scrambled up, clutching the check. "Where are you going?" She stopped at the car door and looked back one last time. "I have a meeting with the architects," she said. "I'm buying the Skyline penthouse building. I'm turning it into a shelter for women starting over." She got in. The car drove away. Trenton stood on the curb, holding a check for $10,000, watching his billionaire wife disappear into the traffic. It was enough money to survive for a few months, but it wasn't enough to buy back his pride. And as he stood there, his phone buzzed. It was a notification from LinkedIn. Bianca Russo has updated her relationship status to single. Bianca Russo has started a new position at Omnicorp. Trenton laughed. It was a broken, jagged sound. He sat down on the curb and buried his face in his hands. 6 months later, the skyline of the city looked the same, but the power dynamics within it had shifted tectonically. The Skyline penthouse, once the ultimate symbol of Trenton Miller's vanity, had been gutted. It no longer housed a bachelor pad for a hedge fund manager. The gold faucets were gone. The marble floors were covered in soft, durable rugs. It was now the common room for the Caldwell Haven, a transitional housing program for women escaping financial abuse. Valerie stood on the balcony, the wind whipping through her hair. She wasn't holding a glass of champagne. She was holding a mug of tea, watching the city wake up below her. "The press is waiting downstairs. Arthur's voice came from the doorway. He was still in his wheelchair, but he looked 10 years younger. The grey pallor of stress was gone, replaced by a rosy, mischievous glow. They want to know if the rumours about the Q3 earnings are true. Valerie turned, smiling. Let them wait. It builds anticipation. You're getting good at this, Arthur chuckled, rolling onto the deck. A little too good. The board is terrified of you. Charles Kensington actually brought me a muffin yesterday. A muffin, Valerie? The man hasn't performed a carbohydrate-based act of kindness since 1990. Charles knows his contract is up for renewal in January, Valerie said dryly. He's auditioning for his job. Valerie looked back at the city. It had been a grueling 6 months. She had fired half the executive suite, the old boys club that had protected men like Trenton. She had promoted quiet, hard-working employees who, like her, had been overlooked for years. Pembroke Industries wasn't just profitable again. It was respected. Have you heard from him? Arthur asked softly. He didn't need to say the name. No, Valerie said. The divorce was finalized last week. He didn't even show up to court. His lawyer said he couldn't afford the parking fee. Across town, in a strip mall that smelled faintly of fryer grease and desperation, Trenton Miller adjusted his tie. It was a cheap polyester blend he'd bought at a discount store. He stood in the showroom of Bargain Motors, a used car dealership located next to a pawn shop. "Miller!" the manager shouted from the glass booth. "Get off your phone. There's a customer looking at the '09 sedan. Go close the deal." I'm going, Trenton muttered. He walked out onto the lot, putting on his best smile. It was a cracked, faded version of the dazzling grin he used to wear at galas. The customer was a skeptical teenager with his dad. "It's a great car," Trenton said, patting the hood. "Low mileage. Previous owner was a little old lady." "The bumper is held on with duct tape," the teenager pointed out. "That's custom detailing," Trenton lied. As he haggled over $100, Trenton glanced at the TV playing in the waiting room window. It was tuned to the local news. Breaking news. Valerie Caldwell Miller, CEO of Pembroke Industries, announces record-breaking profits and a new charitable initiative. The camera zoomed in on Valerie. She looked radiant. She was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Trenton's entire year of commission at this lot. Next to her, Arthur Pembroke was beaming like a proud father. Trenton felt a physical ache in his chest. That should have been him. He should be standing next to her, wearing a bespoke suit, laughing at the cameras. If he had just been kind. If he had just looked at her and seen a partner instead of a prop. If he hadn't forced her to sign that damned prenup over $10,000. "Hey, buddy," the customer's dad snapped, waving a hand in Trenton's face. "Are you listening? I said we'll take it if you throw in a full tank of gas." Trenton looked at the man. He looked at the rusted sedan. He looked at the TV screen where his ex-wife was currently cutting a ribbon with golden scissors. "Yeah," Trenton whispered, his voice hollow. "I'll throw in the gas. I'll throw in whatever you want." He walked back to the office to get the paperwork. On the desk, his phone lit up. It was a notification from a debt collector. He swiped it away. He sat down in his creaking chair and looked at the framed photo he still kept hidden in his drawer. It was a picture of him and Valerie from 5 years ago, eating pizza on the floor of their first apartment. She was laughing. He was looking at the camera, trying to look cool. He realized now, far too late, that he was the only one in the photo who wasn't real. Back at the penthouse, Valerie finished her tea. She set the mug down on the railing. "Ready to go down?" Arthur asked. "The sharks are circling." Valerie straightened her blazer. She touched the diamond brooch on her lapel, the one Arthur had given her that fateful night. "Let them circle," Valerie said, her eyes flashing with the steel of a woman who had walked through fire and come out forged in gold. "I'm the one feeding them now." She walked back inside, leaving the balcony door open. The wind carried the sound of the city, a symphony of horns, sirens, and life. It was noisy, chaotic, and beautiful, and for the first time in her life, Valerie didn't just live in the city. She owned it. And that is the story of how one act of cruelty cost a man billions, and how one act of kindness revealed a queen. Trenton Miller spent his life chasing gold, only to realize he had been holding a diamond the entire time, and he threw it away because he was too arrogant to see its value. It's a harsh reminder that you should never judge someone by their quiet demeanor or their simple clothes. You never know who is really holding the keys to the castle. What would you have done if you were Valerie? Would you have given Trenton a second chance, or was leaving him with his $10,000 exactly what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes drama and hard karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.